It was late evening, the kind of dusky quiet where the streetlights buzzed faintly and the air smelled of damp leaves. I had just stepped off the curb after work, exhaustion pulling at my bones, when the blinding headlights came too fast, too close. The screech of tires never came, only the slam of metal and the crushing pain as I was thrown onto the pavement. My scream echoed off the houses, blood pooling beneath me, chest rattling with each shallow breath. I lifted my head just enough to see the porch light of my parents' house flick on. For a moment, I thought they would finally come, but then, with deliberate slowness, I saw my mother's silhouette behind the curtain. She peeked out, met my eyes, and yanked the blinds shut. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. Through the thin night air their voices carried. My father's dismissive grunt. Not our problem if she dies out there. My mother's laugh followed, sharp as glass. Maybe the street will finally clean itself. Useless girl can't even look both ways. Their words cut deeper than the impact of the car. I pressed my palm against the gravel to drag myself closer, crying out, "Please, help me." But my sister's mocking voice joined theirs from inside, sneering, "Shut up already. People are trying to sleep. You're embarrassing us as always." The cold seeped into my body, blood soaking my clothes, but the betrayal burned hotter than the wound. A neighbor's porch light flickered on across the street, and for a fleeting second, I felt hope. Yet even then, my parents' voice pierced the silence again. Dad growling, "Don't open that door. If anyone asks, we didn't see a thing." They weren't worried for me. They were worried about what the neighbors might think if their perfect facade cracked. The hours crawled. I finally dragged myself to the gutter where a passing delivery driver spotted me slumped against the curb and rushed me to the ER. Broken ribs, fractured arm, stitches running up my leg. The doctors kept shaking their heads, murmuring how lucky I was to be alive. But lying there in that hospital bed, tubes in my arms, all I could think about was the image of the blinds snapping shut. Not once did my parents visit. Not once did they call. The nurse said she reached out to them. My mother's reply? "We're busy. We already told you. She's not our responsibility." I remember staring at the white ceiling, jaw clenched, tears leaking sideways. That was the moment something in me hardened. If they wanted me to die out there alone, then fine. I would let the version of me who begged for their love die that night. But I would rise again, and when I did, every ounce of loyalty I had wasted on them would turn into something they couldn't shut the blinds against. The weeks of recovery were brutal. My body ached with every step, every breath, but the humiliation ached worse. My coworkers asked where my family was. I laughed bitterly, changing the subject. Inside, I replayed their cruelty over and over. I started documenting everything. The nurse's notes about their refusal, the neighbors who heard their comments, the delivery driver who saw me bleeding in front of their house while their lights stayed off. Every detail I tucked away, not for pity, but for the storm I was building. My parents believed shutting those blinds closed the chapter. They didn't know I was writing a new one, and this time, it would end with me standing while they begged, just like I had begged that night, bleeding on the concrete. I spent weeks in the hospital relearning how to move without feeling like my body was a prison. Every groan of pain, every jagged inhale reminded me of that night, the moment I looked up at my parents' window and saw the blinds snap shut. But as my bones knit together, something else was rebuilding inside me. Resolve. The doctors told me recovery would take months. My parents told the nurse I wasn't worth even one visit. That contrast fueled me more than any medicine could. When I was discharged, I didn't go home to their house. I rented a tiny room above a laundromat with the little savings I had and took a part-time job at a diner down the block. Each plate I scrubbed, every late-night shift I endured, wasn't just for survival. It was part of my plan. I knew I couldn't just confront them screaming. They thrived on dismissing me. My revenge had to strike where it hurt them most. Their carefully curated image of being a respectable, admired family in the community. Their entire lives revolved around appearances. Dad boasted about being a self-made man. Mom paraded herself as the perfect parent, and my sister flaunted the attention she got as the golden child. I began listening, watching, gathering small details. My father had shady business deals he bragged about over beers with his friends at the local bar. My sister strutted through town with teachers and neighbors praising her, not knowing the scholarships she claimed were hers were actually favors my parents pulled through threats and lies. My mother hosted charity luncheons, smiling with the very neighbors she mocked behind closed doors. The hypocrisy was endless, so I started laying the groundwork quietly. At the diner, people talked, regulars gossiping over coffee, neighbors venting about my parents' arrogance. I nodded, listened, added little truths from my own pocket. "Oh, did you hear how my mom laughed when I nearly died outside her house?" It sounded too outrageous, but with each detail, the seeds of doubt sprouted. I never pushed. I let others connect the dots. At the same time, I wrote. Late at night, in that cramped little room, I poured everything into letters and journals. The betrayal, the cruelty, the exact words they'd thrown at me while I bled in the street. I wasn't sure how I'd use them yet, but I knew I would. The act of writing made my pain solid, something I could wield instead of drown in. The turning point came when I ran into the delivery driver who saved me. He froze when he saw me, alive, upright, scarred, but standing. "I thought you'd," he began, but I cut him off with a smile. "Not yet." He told me how my parents barely acknowledged him when he tried to tell them what happened that night. They said, "She exaggerates. Don't get involved." His fists clenched as he spoke, and I realized my anger wasn't mine alone anymore. Others had seen. Others remembered. That was when my idea sharpened into a blade. My parents' greatest weapon had always been the silence they imposed on me. But I could use silence too. Silence in the right moment. Silence that spoke louder than their lies. My plan wasn't to humiliate them online or scream in their faces or beg them to admit the truth. No. My plan was to let the people they wanted to impress see them for who they really were, not through words but through absence. I would starve them of the attention they craved and then strike when they were desperate for me to play my role in their story. I bided my time. Months passed. I saved money, strengthened my body, rebuilt my sense of self. I never visited their house, never answered their rare perfunctory texts, never gave them the satisfaction of a reaction. And slowly, I heard it. Whispers of confusion. Why doesn't she come around anymore? Didn't she almost die? Why didn't they do anything? The cracks in their mask widened. One night, sitting in that tiny room, I looked at myself in the mirror. The scars on my arm were faint now, pale lines against my skin. I touched them and whispered, "This is your proof. You lived when they wanted you gone." My pulse quickened with a thrill I hadn't felt in years. The power was shifting. I knew the final move had to be patient, deliberate. They would beg, just like I had, bleeding on the pavement. But when they did, I would decide whether to let them in or leave them outside the blinds, just as they left me. When the moment came, it was almost ordinary, almost quiet. My parents thought the world still revolved around them, that their cruelty would never circle back. But silence has a way of gathering weight, and I had let mine build until it was unbearable for them. It started with my sister's graduation banquet. They planned it like it was a royal coronation. Caterers, photographers, neighbors invited, politicians pretending to care. They expected me to show up meek and small, sitting in the corner, clapping for my sister like I had always been forced to. I didn't. I waited until the last moment, standing just outside the hall where the sound of clinking glasses and self-congratulations spilled into the street. My absence was noticed almost immediately. Neighbors whispered, "Where's the other daughter?" Didn't she recover from that? Accident? Inside, my parents smiled too hard, lying through their teeth. "She's busy. You know how ungrateful children can be." But the questions didn't stop. My silence, my refusal to fill the role they carved out for me, was spreading cracks through their perfect facade. The second blow came without me lifting a finger. The delivery driver who saved me that night finally spoke up when one of my father's so-called friends joked about me being the dramatic daughter." He slammed his beer on the bar and said, "Dramatic? She was bleeding out in the street while you people shut your blinds." Word spread. Small towns don't keep secrets, and soon everyone knew what they had done. I didn't need to post it online, didn't need a camera. It lived on the lips of the community, retold in sharper detail each time. By the time I finally decided to walk into their world again, the damage was done. My mother called me first, her voice trembling in a way I had never heard. "You need to come to your father's award ceremony. Everyone will be there. They'll expect you." Expect me. That was the key. For once, they weren't dictating, they were begging. They needed me to show up, to repair their reputation with my compliance. So I went. I dressed plainly, no makeup to hide the faint scars on my arms. I walked into that banquet hall alone, steady, with every eye turning toward me. My parents lit up like stage performers, rushing to grab my arm and parade me in front of their audience. But I stopped short, pulled away, and let the silence hang heavy. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I simply looked at the crowd and said, "Ask them where I was the night I almost died." Gasps rippled through the room. My parents stuttered, scrambling for words, but the silence I left behind roared louder than their excuses. I turned my back and walked out, leaving them drowning in the questions they could never answer. That was my revenge, not humiliating them online, not screaming for justice, but making their own masks crumble in the faces of the people whose approval they worshipped. And it didn't stop there. Invitations they once received stopped coming. My mother's charity luncheons dried up when neighbors whispered about her cruelty. My father's business partners pulled away, wary of the stink attached to his name. My sister, once the golden child, found herself tainted by association. The empire they built on appearances rotted from the inside out. They tried calling, knocking on the door of my tiny apartment. Once, I opened it just enough for my father's desperate words to slip through. "We're sorry. We need you. Please." I let the silence stretch, watching his face pale as the door clicked shut. They had slammed the blinds on me while I bled. Now I left them outside, pounding on doors that would never open. But the sweetest part? My son never once had to watch me beg. He saw me rise, scarred but standing, teaching him that dignity doesn't come from others. It comes from choosing not to crawl when the world demands it. And as my parents' voices grew hoarse from begging, mine grew stronger in the only place it mattered, in my own home, with my son safe, loved and free of their poison. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.